Hello, adults. As you know, I like to read, and a few years ago, I discovered this book called Luther's Lives, Two Contemporary Accounts of Martin Luther. I've read a lot of things written by people in this day and age about Luther, or at least recently. And they have value, great value, because they work really hard, the writers do, to study and dig up facts. But there's a special authority given to people who actually knew the person that they're writing about. And so this book is a bringing together of two different accounts of Martin Luther, one written by Luther's best friend, Philip Melanchthon, and another written by one of his most bitter enemies, a guy that I pronounce it Cocleus. I don't know if that's the right way, but anyway, these two pro and cons brought together, and it's kind of interesting. The first little orange here, that's Luther's good friend. That's all that he is recorded. All of these white pages are written by Cocleus, the enemy of Luther. And if you wonder whether Cocleus was not, did not feel kindly about Luther, he writes at one point, thus this most absurd race of heretics, this offscouring of impiety, of sins, and of filth is called Lutherans. Ouch! And then down here he says, the evil genius has never attacked the earth with a more harmful sect than this. And here we thought Lutherans were, quiet pew sitters. Cocleus, he didn't think so. He thought we were more dangerous than that. Well, now, I have heard about Cocleus for years and years. I studied about him, and when I studied Luther, years ago in college and mostly seminary, and basically all I heard was bad stuff about Cocleus. And so now, but he'd never been translated into English, and so this writer, whose name is Elizabeth Vandiver, translated Cocleus, that's a lot of pages, from the Latin. I think it was originally written in Latin. And so I could read it, and I thought, boy, oh boy, I'm going to now read a life of Luther from somebody that hated his guts. And you know what I discovered is time and time again, Cocleus tells the truth. He lays out facts as facts, but then he goes on to interpret those facts from his own Catholic point of view. And at the time, Catholic Lutheran were kind of bitter towards each other, definitely bitter. But how fascinating that Cocleus has now become a trusted source of biographical information on Martin Luther. I mean, and Cocleus was everywhere. He was at the famous speech that Luther gave when he was asked, will you recant? Will you admit that what you've written is untrue? And Luther said, nope. He said, here I stand, I can do no other. Cochleus was in the room. He watched that scene. He was an eyewitness. And then what did he do? He went to Luther's room afterwards, and they talked and talked and talked, sometimes pleasantly and sometimes not. But talk about an eyewitness, good grief, on that very, very famous day in Luther's life, Cochleus was right there and even looked him up. I guess the reason why I thought of mentioning Cochleus is, we've had a lot of pleas to talk, to not just listen to people who agree with us, but to also listen to the arguments or the perspectives of those we disagree with. And is fascinating to read about Luther from someone that didn't like him, thought Luther was a threat, but yet gave a lot of information. And whenever scholars try to dig up whether something was true that Cochleus said about Luther, son of a gun, turns out he did. He told the truth. Let's turn on our ears and listen to people who have the opposite point of view from us. We may not disagree with their interpretations, but we might just benefit from their perspective, the things that they mention or find important. So God bless adults in this very interesting time in which we live.